Hello everybody, my name's Simon Wallace. I'm one of the committee members of the Consultancy Specialist Group. Today we have a webinar Managing Expectations, Achieving Harmony Between Client and Consultant with Martin White. Martin is the Managing Director of Intranet Focus Ltd and a visiting Professor of the Information School at the University of Sheffield. He set up Intranet Focus in 1999 after almost 20 years of consulting experience in IT and telecommunications in Europe and North America. And he now works primarily on information management assignments, and he's an author of 10 books and a fellow of the BCS, along with a fellow of the Royal Society of Chemistry. I think Martin will probably say a little bit more about himself, so I won't steal his thunder by going into any more detail now. We're delighted to have Martin with us, and I think Antonio, if you can switch the presentation over so that Martin can present and I can turn my slides off.
Okay, shall I start and entertain everyone, because you need entertaining at this time of night. Well, good evening everyone, thank you for joining me. Achieving harmony between client and consultant. Now, you may think this is a bit pretentious of me telling a group of very experienced consultants how to achieve harmony. In the area I'm working in, as I will explain, actually getting harmony with the client and the consultant, and above all, managing the expectations of the client is quite an achievement. And I've enjoyed doing it. I say I've been a consultant since the early 1980s, and I've been running my own one-man consulting business since 1999. And if you want to go away and have a cup of coffee, this is the book of the presentation. The link will appear on the very last slide, so you can download it for free. I wrote it back in 2017. It's not quite the same as the presentation, but it contains a lot of the sort of the tricks and ideas and lessons learned. So here we go. What do I do for a living? Basically, I'm an information scientist. I started as a chemist, wasn't very good at that, so I went for information science, and I've never regretted it. And really, my consulting business is about information science meeting IT, the digital workplace. People want to get the right technology, what vendors should they bring in, how do they make it all hang together? That's basically the area that I work in. I've been around the world. I've worked in 40 countries overall as a consultant, but most of my work tends to be in Scandinavia and in the rest of Europe. Not much in the UK for some reason, but that's another story. Now then, though I have been a consultant since the early 80s, I really only became what I might call a proper consultant when I joined Logica in 1989 to run their telecommunications market consultancy. And what they absolutely did for me, which was invaluable, is take me away and spend a week training me to be a consultant and doing it the logical way. And one of the key things that they stressed was the difference between fitness to specification and fitness to purpose. Now, as consultants, we love working to the specification, and we like to show at the end we've absolutely met the specification. The problem is, what is the end result in terms of the company and in terms of does it actually fulfill the purpose? And my view is that it's more likely to meet the expectations of the client if it is fit for purpose, because they may not have had a great deal of input into the consulting process. And what I'm doing is working with systems which typically 80% of the employees use at least once or twice a day. It's a very heavy use item. It's not like an HR system or an ERP system where it may be intensively used by a relatively small number of people many times a day. I'm having to deal with systems that are used probably 80, maybe even 90% of the employees, and you can't go and talk to all the employees. And we'll come back to that a little later on. The thing that Logica stressed to me was that, as I've said it here, it's more important to deliver an outcome that's fit for purpose than deliver a profit. If you could show the senior management in Logica that you did the very best you're capable with, the client likes it, but we didn't actually make a profit, that was just put down on the learning slide, because they knew that if the client was really satisfied, the employees were really satisfied, the profits would eventually come. Now, what I'm rather dealing with is, this is a search user interface. And in effect, I'm delivering a search user interface within an organization. I don't do the design, but I do all the background technology that helps the user use all these different areas of a search screen. This is a makeup one. And people have very fixed ideas about what a search engine should look like. Some people think Google's the best way, or Bing, or DuckDuckGo, or whatever. It gets very emotional because search is so much part of our day-to-day lives. People want it to work, and they want it to work absolutely brilliantly. So I've really got to work hard to meet their expectations. And just to show you, Google does that. It focuses in on particular areas. The left-hand side is a very typical Google stick a question in the question box, and you get adverts and you get diagrams and everything else. If you go to Google Scholar, you see the user interface is totally different. It's optimized for the academic and research community. I'm not going to go through why and how, but just to show you that even Google works hard to meet the expectations of the client. It doesn't just give them one size fits all. And just to show you one size doesn't fit all, I don't want you to get into the detail of this, but this is how different professions use different elements of a search screen. Left-hand side legal, right-hand side is clinical. And just look at the color variations are quite different. So within a company, I may have to deliver an expectation that's fit for the legal department, that's fit for the research department, that's fit for the management, that's fit for marketing, and they all want it in slightly different ways. That's why managing the expectations in my business is quite a challenge, and I enjoy it. And as a bit of light relief, I'm an organist. And believe you me, organists get very good at playing with strange user interfaces. Every organ is different. This is me on an organ in Paris a few years ago, making a very big noise in a very dark church. It's a great relaxation from the pressures of the working day. One of the things that I have done is I've written a lot of books, 10 in all. I'm not showing you all 10. These are some of the more important ones. And I've always made an effort to write a book about what I'm working on, so that I can go and put it on the table and say, look, there's the book on enterprise search. Read through it. It tells you how I go about things, what my view is, what I think the priorities are. And I find this is a very good way of starting discussions going, and for them having confidence in me as a consultant. Now, I'm fortunate to have that ability and that opportunity. But I have found it very important to be able, if you like, to give something to someone at the very first meeting. And I'll come to the first meeting in a couple of slides or so. So that's some of the books I've written. They've made me no money at all in terms of royalty, but in terms of building a bridge to a consultant, to a client, they've been invaluable. I thought you might be interested in what my rules of engagement were when I started off. Several of them very quickly. I only work in areas in which I have business experience. I do law, pharmaceuticals, engineering. That's pretty much my key areas, because I feel I need to really understand the environment of the client. I'm not a general purpose consultant to some extent. I never work for central or local government, and the reason for that is that they always want to go through procurement. And I'm not working for procurement, I'm working for the employees. And if procurement start making decisions, thank you, I'll work somewhere else. Hence 3. I only work on a fixed fee basis. I like to share the risk, and I'll come back to risk a couple of times in this presentation. I only work on interesting projects. The most interesting one probably is for a convent in London, which had some problems sharing with its sister convents around the world. And that was a really interesting project. It's not until you've had a project meeting with a Mother Superior you really know how you have to be able to communicate really well. I always ask for a meeting with a project sponsor before I start work. If I can't talk to the sponsor, I don't start work. I want to meet that sponsor. And above all, I always smile, because it makes other people wonder what you know that they don't. So these are the big concerns I'm going to talk about tonight. How do you build a win-win relationship? How do you get value for money? I'm not going to take you all of them, but you'll see this graphic emerge as we go through the talk this evening. And these are the 6 big concerns that I face in my consulting work. But just to put this in context, this is a typical project plan for the work I do, which is helping companies select an enterprise search application. Typically, this takes about 12 months. And this is only to the point that the contract is signed. It may then take another 6 months to install it, implement it, test it, and release it. So it could be 18 months from when the light bulb goes off, hey, we need a new search application. 18 months later, it actually appears on the screen, and it appears on every screen in the organization at the same time. You cannot do a soft launch. You have to do a hard launch to the entire company. And of course, over that 18 months, the expectations may well change. So managing them is part of what I do. And that's a key role of me as a consultant, to be able to say, hold on, that change you've done in your business process, I think we need to think about that, because that could have an impact on what we deliver in search. If you're going to read a book, read this one. This is a really fascinating book. I'm sure that most of you have come across a Kinder egg, the little chocolate egg with a little toy inside for children. And inside that egg is a piece of paper that basically says, do not give this egg to anyone under 3. And this is a brilliant book that looks at the 27 different languages that message is in and raises the issue about how different the translation is. When you look at it, I mean, the one that always comes to mind is Swahili. There's no word in Swahili for toy. There's only a Swahili word for gift. There's no concept of toy. So it's a short book, but it will get you used to one of the key things that I have to face, and that is I'm working with usually multinational companies in a multilingual environment. This is an analysis of one of my clients, big German pharmaceutical company. And if you look at the top, you'll see this interesting thing that 73% of the content that they hold is in English, but only 24% of the employees speak German as their primary language. That's based not on asking them, but looking at their location. And that has a lot of implications. So 76% of the employees are looking for English language documents in their second or maybe third language. And that's a challenge. How many, do they know the synonyms? Do they know, for example, it's OECD in French, it's not in English, it's not in French. Language is incredibly important when you're searching. Many of those documents may well have been written by people who do not have English as their first language. And therefore they may have used the wrong word or the wrong combination of words. Wrong's the wrong word, are different. And do they get the same message across? And often you find these documents are written in more than one language. And this is so when you start doing work on a multinational project, you find all sorts of issues around language and culture can quite overwhelm a project. And one of the things I think that we are very bad at understanding is the fact that you can read a language, write a language, speak a language, and understand a language, i.e. as it's spoken to you, at different levels of competence. I was working last year on a very big project in France, which required working in 27 languages, or rather they wanted to deliver it in 27 languages. And the search team that I worked with were absolutely brilliant, a fantastic project manager. But most of what they'd done by the time I'd arrived on the scene is to write a specification in French English. They spoke English very fluently indeed, but when it came to writing, that was a much bigger challenge. And we had to do all sorts of work. We actually had to take a section out and go away and get it professionally translated because the language was getting in the way of understanding what their expectations were, because they were writing it in a way that was very difficult to understand. And I'm sure you've probably come across this concept of code switching, when people in a meeting suddenly revert to their primary language. I can remember another client in France, I'm not just picking on the French, where when we saw a slide go up on the screen, there was clearly a mistake. There was a numeric mistake. There couldn't be that number. And the people around the table were speaking excellent English. They picked up the phone and for the next 10 minutes, they spoke nothing but French to try to work out what was going on. And then they came back to me and said, no, it's not 15 million, it's 5 million. And that was the summary of a 15-minute discussion in French. And this is something that you have to be ready to cope with in the course of a multilingual project. There's no way of getting around it. Which comes back to thinking about how you're going to map your stakeholders. And I'm sure all of you have got various diagrams about stakeholder mapping. But the one that I find is so important to understand in meeting expectations is the culture and language dimension. The different countries, different groupings that are in the world all have different ideas of what they want. And I can still remember working in a German company, not the pharma one, where the view of the project was totally different from the British subsidiary which had hired me. And it wasn't that the business was different, it was the way that the management culture had developed was totally different. And that was quite a major piece of politicking I had to get through. So the consultant walks in, and this is a typical consultant on the first day. Oh my word, you know, he's got his hat on, and actually the picture you might be a woman as well as a man. But I find I have to think carefully that just because I have worked in a large number of projects, the person I am dealing with is maybe their first consulting exercise. And they may be actually very concerned about what's all this going to be, you know, hence the sort of, oh my word, he looks stony-faced. Are we really going to have to work with him? Are the storm clouds, thank you to my son for this picture, going to roll over the top of us? If you haven't seen a book by Edgar Schein, which I'm just about to put up, you really should do it, because Schein gets to what is at the basis of building client relationships. Humble consulting, how to provide real help faster. It's quite an old book now, but it's a really good book to look into, about with insights about, if you like, the psychology of consulting. So let's start off with my roadmap. How do we build this win-win relationship? This is a wedding in La Rochelle in France when we were on holiday a few years ago. And what I noticed was that the bride was doing an absolutely superb job introducing everyone to everyone else. Now, as a church organist, I've gone to a lot of weddings, and you know that the bride's family sit one side and the groom's the other side, and they don't meet. and they even line up, you know, sort of, oh, well, we'll stick together. This was, you have to bring everyone together, and you have to actively involve people in the project, not just send them a memo, not just have a Zoom call to explain what's going on. And I put a huge amount of effort into my first meeting. I always want to plan this to the nth degree, and I'm going to talk a bit about having diagrams in a moment. But I think that as consultants, sometimes we too are a bit concerned about, well, how's this going to go? This is a bit new to me. But I think you have to really plan this first meeting. It paid off for me in 2001 when I was working on a project in Washington. And we actually, the project team, gamed all sorts of things that might go wrong with the project, because to us it was a massive project. And one of the things that we gamed was, well, what happens if one of us can't get on the plane and come across to continue the work? You know, maybe we're ill or whatever. And we came up with some solutions, which is just as well, because we started the project one day before 9/11. And we managed to have a new project plan by the end of that day, which gave the IMF, which is who we're working for, confidence that we could get around the problems that we looked as though we were going to face. So really go for that first meeting agenda. And I love having a diagram. This is one of my favorites I've been using for years. That success is a combination of the vision, the skills, the incentives, the resources, and the action plan. And this is not mine. I put the link below. But I find that having a diagram at a meeting works wonders, because it's particularly if you've got people with multiple languages around the table, because it gives them something to hang off on. They can see what direction you're going in. They can scribble on it, whether they, you know, or over Zoom, they can scribble on a whiteboard, I don't mind. But it just gives me a sense to start saying, we've got to get all these sorted. The skills of the team, what's the benefits they're going to get from it, what are the resources we've got, what's the plan going to be. So I'm not saying this is the, you know, a super duper solution. But I find that putting, and here's another one, this is on my search solution, bother to read it. The point is, I put this on the table, metaphorical or otherwise, and I find it's a way of starting to get people to understand the whole picture, much better than putting a whole stream of PowerPoint slides up on a screen. I really, apart from that, I'm using it tonight, I really do dislike PowerPoints for small meetings. Another thing I do right up front is say, okay, how are you going to assess my performance? Is it about how realistic my planning's been, or knowledge sharing at the close of the project? Because I want to create the impression that I am in it with them. And I may slip up at times, I may make mistakes, but I'm human. And on the right-hand side, if you're wondering what that is, it's the record of signal box, what trains came in, what times they left, all sorts of things. And it's really about just agreeing the performance metrics so that the client feels they're in control. And that this is a discussion I'm having right at the very first moment. So I'm working so hard at the beginning to build that win-win relationship. And then, of course, comes the problem of value for money. Good Lord, you're charging X a day. Well, that's got to be brilliant for that much. And one of the problems with getting value is that we all have our different ideas of what the value might be. This is why I put an auctioneer up. Rupert is an auctioneer just down the road from where I live in Sussex. And as well as being an auctioneer, he's also a priest, which is an interesting combination. But the point I want to make here is that every stakeholder, every employee has a different view of what the value is of the project. And you have to work very hard to find out what they are seeing out of the project. Is it that it's going to improve their productivity, which is a metric I just cannot abide? Is it going to make their life easier? Are they going to progress their careers better? But understanding value for money, I think, is absolutely crucial. And all those nice little stakeholder charts, there has to be an overlay, which I have put on, saying what do they see as the value of the project? How do they express it? Is it in money? Is it ambition? Is it in vision? Is it in business prospects? What I try very hard to do is to focus on the decisions that are going to be made as the result of the engagement. And this is just a flow chart developed by a friend of mine, Charles Citron, because I don't just want to write a report. I want to understand what the decision is going to be made, because that helps me the whole time help define the scope, and we're going to come back to that shortly. So I have two basic approaches: a decision-focused value or a risk reduction value. And as you will begin to see, I am very open about risks. And I often find that risk reduction is a great way to justify a project. Even if it's not been on the table beforehand, I like to get risk onto the table, talking about it, and giving a sense of how the benefit is going to be to the organization. Remembering that public companies have a duty to reduce their visibility, reduce the risk to the stakeholders, to the shareholders. So I sort of flip between, is this a decision-focused project, or is this a risk reduction project, or has it elements of both? But this goes beyond, oh, we're going to have a new search application. I want to put a new intranet in. I want to take out Slack and put a different collaboration project in place. Now, all of us, I'm sure, have come along with projects where the problem is, how do we manage scope creep? Well, this is, I just love this book. I'm sorry, Simon. I've changed most of the pictures. I forgot to change this one. I work backwards from the report because I've not yet done a consulting assignment where there is no report at the end of the day. And yet, as I say here, there is rarely any discussion about what this report looks like. This is the key deliverable in terms of someone signing off and saying, yes, Martin has done the job, pay him $72,000. I want to know who is going to read it and why, and what are their expectations, and as I've just been saying, what decisions are they going to take having read the report? And I find focusing on this report and what it's going to be used for is a great help in managing the expectations. I really do worry when, oh yes, we want you to write a report about this, this, and this for senior management. No, sorry, who on senior management? Oh well, there's the personnel director and there's the logistics director. And actually, the chief executive, I'd like to see it as well. Well, do they want the same report? I'd almost rather write 2 or 3 slightly different reports. And this is one of the reasons that I always work on a fixed price basis. Because if I am going to make changes, if I'm going to write 2 reports rather than 1, I don't want them to say, oh, yep, he's going to charge us another $5,000. This is all, should be all part of the relationship with the client. And right up front, I start to develop the report structure. And you'll see this on the left-hand side of the screen. Here are the main headings and the subsections and the number of pages. And the page is just an arbitrary half a page, 1 page. But it's going to end up at about 15 pages. And I work hard very early on to see if this is going to meet the expectations. And someone may say, you're only going to do 1 page on user requirements. No, we really do want that in more detail. Okay, so let's up that to 3 pages. No, far more than that. Oh, 5. But then if we're going to put 5 into that, it's out of balance with everything else. So what about we do a summary of the user requirements and do a separate detailed report on the outcomes of the interviews? And I found over the last 10 years, this works for me as a way of all the way through the project, keeping a hold on how the project is developing. Because if someone says, yeah, we'd really like you to talk about this in your report, I'm saying, well, look, it's not on the list. Let's see how we can put it in, what the balance is. Do we have to talk about more money? I hope very much. But getting the report scope agreed has helped me enormously in hopefully delivering satisfied clients. And I told you I was going to talk about risks, and I want to do it again. This is one of my favorite risk pictures. It's some stalks on top of a chimney in Lagos in Portugal. And obviously they decided, well, if it's blue sky, we are safe on top of the chimney. It's not going to be, there are no fires tonight. And I put a lot of effort into managing the project risk. Now, there are books written on project risks, and I'm not going to take anything away from them. The point is, I want to discuss it right up front, because I have found that the earlier I can discuss risk, people actually feel comfortable because they understand that, yes, there are risks, but the consultant we've got has recognized them, and this is the way we're going to get around them. Because although risk management is something that is often used at quite a senior level, at the level I'm often dealing with, which is quite low down in the organization, believe it or not, research manager or intranet manager, the concepts of risk and risk appetite are really not understood. And right at the bottom is this key one, is what's going to cause a red flag and how do we manage it? And I find this is all part of the engagement process. I'm willing to put it out on the table that there are some risks here. You know, the risk is I don't think I can manage it in the time. You're telling me I need to talk to some people in Japan, but you're not sure who the people are in Japan to talk to. Let's get them all on a piece of paper and do some classic, I don't know, impact probability scoring. It's really not the scoring that's important, and I don't focus on trying to prioritize the risks just to get people talking about them. And I've found that's been a great help in my consulting work. And this is a chart that I often use, because this comes from a company called Pirani Risk. I've managed to lose my own slide. And it's basically looking at this concept of risk appetite, the risk tolerance, and then we're in serious trouble. And I get people to understand there are only three variables in any project. It's the schedule, the scope, and the resources. Those, to my mind, are the three variables. And then we just talk about it in terms of the schedule. Yeah, I think we're okay on that. You know who you need to talk to. There's no one going off on holiday inconveniently in the middle of the project. The scope, you're trying to do really a great deal in that time period. I'm a bit worried that we're not going to get all the scope that you want. You think you want to replace this application and that application. I think we've got a problem here. In terms of the project resources, it's a great team, but we're right at the limits of the spare time that they've got because they're not being full-time on the project. They're working on other things as well. So this is what I talk through in order to get an understanding that we're all in this together. How can I help the project team emerge triumphant and I just walk off into the sunset? I'm really not that important in the general scheme of things. The risks that I've found the most challenging ones, I'm just going to run through quickly. I'm sure that you've got your own list, but these are the ones that I keep on coming up against, is that you can't get hold of the project sponsor. Sometimes I often wonder whether there is a project sponsor. But someone up there has signed off on the project, given the budget, said go and do it. But I find it often very difficult to go and talk to them. And I do get a bit naughty and a bit upset when I can't talk to the sponsor, because I want to find out what their expectations are. So to me, this is a major risk. Oh yes, we'll get you to talk to him. Yeah, it might be a month or so. He's a very busy man, and I sort of do, if necessary, have to go around and climb up on a big ladder and say, I want to talk to him. I find a lot of problems in getting access to internal systems, particularly when I'm having to do it remotely. One of the challenges over the last couple of years working from home has been getting access to things like search systems and other systems, because the security, and I absolutely understand why the security is there, but the difficulty in getting access to these is just beyond belief. Microsoft Teams is my favorite system that just can't seem to deliver anything when I want it to. But I need access to these systems. I need to test the existing enterprise search systems, and I need to look at some of the repositories. And that's a big risk for me. And then there's the documents. You say, can I have a look at the documents, on a particular subject? Oh, well, yeah, but that was last year. You don't need to see those. Yes, please. Can I see them? I really do want to track down all the relevant documents. As someone working in search, relevance and finding relevant documents is everything. And a drip feed through a project is a terrible situation to be in. So I really try and manage that one. Key staff are not available for interview. I'm trying to find out what people's expectations are, and then, oh, you can't talk to so-and-so. Oh, when he's moved on now, and we're not quite sure who's taken this position. That's quite a common one I have to cope with. And then the poor project manager is doing their day job as well as working for me. And that's something that we have to explore very early on. If you want me to come and be a consultant, I'm going to need most, if not all, of your time. And then there's when the scope's changed by what I call edict, not by agreement. You're suddenly getting halfway through it, and oh yes, didn't we tell you we wanted to put a separate system into R&D? No, you didn't. And stakeholders appearing without warning. Those are my top 7. Those are the ones that I go into my first meeting knowing I need to have them under control. And I'm sure you do the same sort of things. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but being open up front, in my experience, is one of the key things about delivering to expectations, because right from the word go, you're managing those expectations. Now, I told you right up front, the systems I put in may be used by 60, 70, 80% of the workforce. If I'm working for a big pharma company, that could be 100,000 users. It's something that I think is relatively unusual in IT consultancy, and that's to do large-scale user requirements work. In the business I'm in, it's absolutely essential. And on the left-hand side here is a big shopping mall in Palo Alto, which I used to visit regularly when I was working in the United States. And what you realize is that it's not just, oh, what do you want a shopping mall to do? Well, I want to go and shop. You've got to dig down. What are you actually looking for? If you're the information desk on one of at the front of this shopping mall, how do they deal with the inquiries? How do they direct you around? What are you looking for? And they go into a question and answer session to help you. Well, I'm looking for a birthday present. Well, this mail is full of birthday presents. Well, who are you looking for? I'm looking for my grandson, who's now 12 years old, and he's got these interests. And so I have to do a lot of work to dig down to see what the expectations are for what the system's going to deliver. Otherwise, and this mall is brilliant. It's open air, you can walk around it, sunshine, fantastic. It's even got a Tiffany's, but I've not yet managed to get past the man on the door. So you have to work hard to define what people want way beyond, oh, we just need a bigger shopping centre. We just like some bigger shops. And this is when you run up to another risk, is that clients don't like you to go walking around their organisations. It's something that I think is relatively unusual. I could be wrong, throw at me in the Q&A. But in particular, working in Germany, it's a particular challenge because there are workers' councils in Germany who have a very important input into any consultant coming in and talking to employees. And one of the things that I have to look at to get my systems work is about workarounds. So quite a number of IT systems duplicate existing processes. But when you actually look at the process, that's actually not how it's done. And I'll come on to that in just a minute. So what I try and do is divide up my potential users into some categories and start working with 3 or 4 people from each of these scenario personas, as they're called, to work out what they want out of the system. What are their goals? What do they need from a new information system? And usually, even in a big company, you can get a rein with 7 or 8 different personas, and maybe then you interview 8 to 10 in each persona, and that can give you a very good assessment, even on 100,000 employees in a large pharmaceutical company. And the way that I manage user interviews, and this has been particularly valuable during the last 2 years, is I send out a two-sided, this is a two-sided A4 PowerPoint slide, which is basically briefing everyone about who I am, what the project is all about, and what I want to talk to them about. And there's my contact information and a bit of my background. And on the back is how I'm going to spend that 10 to 15 minutes on each of these 4 areas. And I find this very valuable when I then get to do the interview, because they've already, first of all, they know what I want to talk about. They've already thought about it and can start to say, look, you know, I don't do much in the way of collaboration. Let's just move on to section C. Well, what do you mean you don't collaborate? You know, let's talk about that a little bit more. So this dates back now 2 or 3 years, but I haven't changed this basic approach. And I spend a lot of time trying to make sure I do the best possible user interviews. And this is where you get the problems of language, because not everyone speaks English at the speed I'm speaking. And one of the things that I've discovered over the years is that what I do is I hand my pen, though of course the last 2 years I haven't been physically there, to the interviewee and say, okay, I'm taking notes, but now you've got the pen, I can't take notes. What is it I haven't talked about? What is it you want to get across to me? And I should say, which I haven't said here, is I never, ever release the interview notes to the company. It's one of my, I won't do it. The interviews are with me. I'll do a summary of the overall interviews. I never release the notes back to the client. But I would highlight this question of workarounds, which no one really talks about very much. It's when there are more than 2 versions of the truth. And there is actually a paper, which is on the right-hand side, which defines all the different workaround types. And these come up so often in my user interviews, because the people are, companies hire very smart people. Those smart people want to do a great job, and they will work around any barriers that are in the way. And one of the differences between fitness to specification and fitness to expectation is fitness to specification is what the company thinks the process is. and you could make it absolutely fit that spec, and they won't like it. It won't do what they want it to do. What they want you to do is they want you to find a way that supports the process that they now developed of this workaround. And I've been finding, particularly over the last 2 or 3 years, getting an open discussion on workaround is very helpful in actually working out what the employees want from the system. I always have problems with focus groups. I have to say that by and large, it's useful to, as I say at the bottom, to validate the outcomes from one-on-one interviews. But generally speaking, it seems good. You get all these people in a room, but you only get one person with a personal objective, or someone's not quite sure actually what goes on, and they'll never talk about the workarounds because they don't want to share their top workaround with everyone else in the group. So I try very hard not to do focus groups other than towards the end of a project where I can just validate what I'm going to do. If you are interested in how to interview users, this is a brilliant guide. Steve Portigal's Interviewing Users, and it's the Bible that I use. It's been in print now for about 5 or 6 years. Very recommendable. And finally, how do we keep track of the project? The reason I put up this photograph I shot in Kuwait, I was working out in Kuwait building an intranet. And what I found was that time is looked at differently in Muslim countries, in Arab countries. They have a different approach to project schedules, to deliverables, to timescales. And there's nothing wrong with that because that's the way they want to look at it. But it was a real eye-opener for me trying to balance my, if you like, English view of time schedules against a Middle Eastern view. And I learned a lot from that particular project, which has stayed with me ever since. And when I was at Logica, one of the things that they taught me to use was this milestone trend analysis diagram, which I found absolutely invaluable. The idea of this is on the left-hand side, you have the various stages, and then across the top you have the months. And that planning line says, okay, system design will be finished by March, hardware complete by June, software complete by August. 4 months later, where have you got to? And here it's showing where some are on the line and some have got quite delayed. And the point about this is it's an open access diagram that you can share with everyone on the team. And it shows how good your forecasting has been, or their forecasting. And there you can do Gantt charts and Excel charts and all sorts of things. I found this is a very valuable way of getting people to understand how the process is going and where the slippage is occurring. And that's, to me, one of the great things I learned from Logica. A couple of shots from Apollo 13, because I think we all remember how the Apollo 13 project, the failure, was so constructively managed to get those 3 astronauts back on Earth safely. And the personal lessons I'll share with you just in these last few minutes. I work hard to make sure that, for example, I've done half a dozen law companies. I never assume that what I've done in the law company last year is what will work in the next year. Every time I try to take a fresh look and not say, yeah, I know what it was like with Fred Bloggs and co. Yeah, I'll do the same here. I try to approach everyone fresh without any assumptions. I always assume that there's always some relevant information that's not being passed on to me. The number of times that a document has suddenly appeared from nowhere, or I come across someone that, if only I'd interviewed 2 months ago, we could have had a whole different approach to the project. I learned the hard way, never try to outmaneuver the client. I did this. This is a lesson learned from the International Monetary Fund. I was having great difficulty with the project manager, and I made the classic mistake of talking to another manager who I thought was totally independent about, if only, I wasn't bad-mouthing him, but I was, getting a bit fed up. And 2 hours later, the project manager said, I think we ought to go and have a coffee, Martin. And that's when I discovered that he and the man I've been speaking to had both been to the same university, and they were very close, even though that was not apparent from their working days and their contacts. I've never done that again. I've often had problems with project teams being inconsistent, people dropping off, new ones coming in. And I suppose one of the things I've learned to do is always have this enduring relationship with a client. It goes back to the logica, is that if you meet their expectations, they will come back to you for more work. They'd rather do that than you deliver a system in which everyone says, you've ticked all the boxes, but it doesn't make an impact on the business, and it doesn't make an impact on the employees. And then, of course, you've got Gene Kranz, and eventually, the great success when it's landed. So, very briefly, transparency is everything. Meeting all the stakeholders, to me, is critically important. Who are they? What are their backgrounds? What do they want from the project? I try to make every single person I meet feel that they are so important to the outcome of the project. They might be quite a junior person in a research department. They have to feel that I'm talking to them and they are the most important person in the company at that moment in time. Every day I sort of take a deep breath on a project and think what might be coming next. I want to be in a situation that I have gamed what the problems might be and I'm ready for them. They might not happen, so I'm not going to put them all up on a whiteboard, but they do change with amazing regularity. And I also like to be up in that helicopter, or increasingly a drone view, because particularly when you're on site in a nice city, and I've been in Stockholm and Vilnius and Lithuania and all sorts of interesting places, and you get a great project team, but you sometimes get lost in all the little detail. And I think it's very important just to be able to stand up and look at the project from a high level. So I hope that those are just some ideas there. I hope there's a little bit that you could use, or, yeah, I'm doing that. Yeah, that's good. Someone else thinks that as well. So I need to thank some consulting companies. Originally, I worked with Business International and Data Corporation. Logica were brilliant. There's some clients there, some consultants I've worked with who taught me just so much. Angela Abel, you will not know. Sadly, she died several years ago. But my book on managing client expectations is dedicated to her, because Angela could manage those relationships better than anyone I've ever met. And then there are 7 clients there who allowed me to experiment with how I did projects. And that really taught me about ways of getting great expectations out of them. All of them in various ways. I tried various tricks that I'd learned, and they accommodated them and said, no, that didn't work for us, but I can see where you're getting to. What about that? So, time for reflection. I hope I've met the expectations of the management team by actually ending at about the right time. If you click on this link when you get the slides, you will get this book. It was published by a Swedish company, Intranet, in 2017, but it is written in English. I enjoyed writing it. I hope that you get something from reading through it. But for now, I'll leave you with this final picture of mine, which is a huge reflecting mirror in Rockefeller Plaza some years ago. And if you look at the right-hand bottom of the screen, you'll see a young lady looking into the middle distance, and that's my wife, Cynthia. And she's saying, if he takes one more picture to illustrate his PowerPoint presentations, I may have to manage his expectations as well. So thank you very much to the consulting group. I've enjoyed this presentation. I hope you've gained something from it. And now it's over to questions. Is there anyone there?
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. I see we have a few questions coming up. The first one that I see is from James Cooper. The question is, I will read it. Does Martin have any thoughts, experience about ensuring business acceptance and successful deployment of the recommended changes?
Yeah, I wonder whether I've actually got quite the question. I think one of the nice things about the work I'm in is I end up with a user interface screen. Even if I haven't designed it, in a way, that's my end product. And I think all the way through, and it's like writing that report, I'm almost taking that, and every stage of the journey, I'm saying, well, if we do this, we can do that. If you use that vendor, you won't get that particular functionality. And I think it's part of something actually you reminded me that I haven't mentioned, but it's part of the relationship building, is what's the communications plan for the project. In the old Prince handbook, building that communications plan was crucial. There's perhaps something I've missed from the presentation tonight. How are we going to keep everyone informed about what is going on? I think just to wrap up that question, I think it's about having almost something physical you can show them, a screenshot, a diagram or something, rather than here's a two-page summary of where the project is. Because people can read diagrams, they can read the schematics, and it gets over the language barrier, because the person reading it may be working in their third language as far as English is concerned. If you're working in Finland, they speak excellent English, but have you ever tried working in Finnish?
Thank you. James, please write in if you're happy with the answer. Otherwise, we will move to the next person. Meanwhile, before we move to the next person, I just want, James is happy. We have a comment from Joanna that it seemed that she couldn't access the PDF of the book in the link. So if you can put it maybe in the chat, or maybe Simon, you can put it in the chat. We have another question from Matthew Donovan. When you say stakeholder appear from nowhere, do you mean that existing stakeholder being unpredictable, or do you mean that new stakeholder popping out of the woodwork?
I think it's someone popping out of the woodwork. And that's often because at the start, the scale of what, particularly in this area I work in, the digital workplaces, is that a good example will be a personnel manager. I was working on a project a couple of years ago where the personnel manager became aware of what we were doing, and for reasons that I can't go into, suddenly realized that they had a major role to play in shaping this project in a way that the project team weren't aware of, because at a high level, the company wanted to change some of their employment policies. And so it's all quite confidential at the level of the project team, but luckily the HR director learned about what was going on and immediately wanted to be a stakeholder in a positive way, but then we had to rethink what we were trying to achieve and what the timescales were, and what other stakeholders. So it's usually one that the team did not identify because they were not thinking that this was of value to a particular person. Because as you know, in a company, so much is confidential, and sometimes you're dealing at quite a low level with that in sort of work I'm dealing with. So it's the ones that pop out from nowhere.
We have a thank you from Matthew. Thank you, Matthew. We have one additional question from Sarah El Haloumi. I hope I pronounced properly the name. Can you thank you for the presentation, Martin. Very interesting. Other than interview and focus group, do you use any other techniques to fully understand the project and stakeholder needs? And how do you challenge the client within your role in the project?
Okay, let me see if I can answer that. I think the first thing is I never do a survey. I never ever do a survey. What I'm trying to do in the end is gain stories from the people I'm interviewing, and then I can use those stories maybe down the line with other people, obviously respecting confidentiality, and change a few things. But if I've got stories to tell, I find that's easy then to convince a stakeholder that I'm going in the right direction and I know what I'm doing. Because, you know, I can change the details, but I can talk maybe about a big fraud case they were managing, and they had to do this to get hold of the case material, and they had a problem here. And it wasn't fraud, it might have been a real estate, but I'm telling a story, and stories are so much more powerful than Excel spreadsheets and survey monkeys and things like this. And I think this is why I go back to the personas and thinking about who you want to talk to. I think there has to be a dialogue between me and the project manager, because they've always got a list. Oh, you've got to talk to Fred and Angela and Agnes and whatever. Hold on, let's find out what we're trying to achieve, what information we need, what's the scale of the people I need to talk to. So it's I think from my point of view, let's talk about it. Let's understand why you want me to talk to those people, because I think you're biasing my work. It's about transparency. And in the end, it's always 80-20. I've got 80% of the requirements. Hopefully I've built the system that the 20% I didn't identify can be relatively easily added into the technology stack. Thank you.
I think that is the last question that I have collected. So,
Antonio, the other thing I say is I always offer a lifetime guarantee on my presentations. So if in a couple of weeks' time you think, I didn't quite understand what Martin was talking about, my email address is on the front slide. Send me an email, because if you didn't understand it, it may be others didn't, and that helps me develop a better presentation. But if you've got a query or you need a reference or anything, martin.white@intranetfocus.com, because we're all members of the consulting group, we're all in this together, and I'd be delighted to share my experience on an individual basis.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Martin.
Well, hopefully we've managed everyone's expectations between us. So thank you to the tech team that have made this possible. And to Antonio and the committee for inviting me. Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Well, it's been great having you talk to us again, Martin. It's always great to hear your sessions, because as well as the enormous experience, you have the most wonderful way of illustrating your points. I always enjoy, and it's great to see you here again. We must make sure we've scheduled you in for something again sometime soon. But I guess that finishes the session for today. Thank you everybody who has been here. So thank you all very much, and you may disconnect.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice one.